Are you ready for episode 8?
Sure, Earthling. I'm ready.
What?
I'm ready. Did you like my entrance?
What are you talking about?
Well, a few minutes ago when I came in from over here after taking a ride in the spaceship and then the aliens dropped me off.
What? You came in from that side. You've been in this building all day, and there are no aliens.
Let's check the footage.
There is no footage because the cameras weren't rolling yet.
Oh, so you cannot prove me wrong.
What are you doing?
I say I came in from this side after the aliens dropped me off.
Okay.
Prove me wrong.
I say you're ridiculous.
Look, if there's no hard evidence, you can't prove me wrong.
Okay. But you know what? I was here. I saw you come in from that door. And I think that I could convince most people that the most likely scenario is the real one. Okay. And most people who know you know that you're ridiculous.
Hey.
Let's do this. Okay, what was that all about?
Well, I was just trying to make a point. We'll circle back to it after show and tell.
Oh, is that what we're calling it now?
Sure, why not?
Okay, all right.
What have we got today?
All right, well, today we have an updated picture of our neighbor's house.
Of course we do.
Of course we do.
You can't stop talking about the neighbor's house.
Well, it is a very loud project right behind my house here. But I'm excited. Look at the roof. They've got places for the windows. This is really going to be exciting. I'm really happy for them.
Yeah, it is. And when we met the contractors, they said it's going to go up pretty quick. And they said 3 months. It's only been a couple of weeks, but yeah, it's going quick.
Yeah. And we've got some beautiful spring photos, more blooms and just
Oh my goodness.
in the area. It's really looking pretty.
It's my favorite time of the year until fall, and then fall's my favorite. But I love all the flowers and stuff when it really gets going. I found this crazy cool fungi in somebody's yard. We were doing a landscape project, and yeah, I don't know what's going on with that, but here's a tulip magnolia close up that I was able to get, and a row of Bradford pears. Some of these you don't even get in the north. The Bradford pears are pretty. And then these are Okuma cherries. They're the first cherries that bloom in the spring. Hyacinths, of course. That's a cool edging, and some more hellebores. I don't know if I remembered to mention when we did hellebores before that they're also called Lenten rose because they bloom during the season of Lent, which is now.
They're so beautiful.
So yeah, this is a flowering quince. I'd never seen one of those until we moved to Tennessee. They come in some different shades, but that one is really dramatic. That's pretty cool. And here's another. This was a smaller Okuma cherry, and I was able to get some close-ups. Just such pretty flowers. Kind of a fun perspective looking up at the sky. It was amazing. I actually took that one today. It was amazing sky.
It was so beautiful today.
And this is one of our favorites. This is from our yard. I didn't know that magnolias came, and you can get a yellow one.
Yeah.
And it's actually called Butterflies Magnolia. And it's really sensitive to frost. We're probably only going to get a couple more days out of it because it's going to frost on Thursday night. But there's a close-up of one of the flowers. It's really pretty. I like it because it's pretty. I like it because it's different.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
And this is another star magnolia. The star magnolia we showed you before had more kind of thinner petals, kind of fringy looking. But this one has pink centers.
Oh, and I wish they could smell it. Can
And
you
it
smell
has
this?
a beautiful aroma.
It's so gorgeous.
Really a nice tree. I took a few pictures of that.
Ugh.
There's the whole tree.
Beautiful.
And this homeowner is fun. She's got teapots and teacups and stuff hanging from the tree. I guess they're kind of natural wind chimes and just a touch of whimsy in the yard. That's pretty fun. And this is a patio peach, which looks a lot like a cherry bloom. Not exactly like an okuma, but some of the blooms, if you get just close up, you can't tell. But I like that one because it's got the bee in it.
Yeah.
That was the first bees that I had seen this spring.
Yeah.
And they are going to town. It's spring. Let's go. I need me some pollen and some nectar.
Yeah. It was really beautiful.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful yard to work in.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about worldview and biblical worldview. And we said in this episode, we were going to start with the general topic of how do I know that the Bible is true? Because if we have a biblical worldview, it hinges on the fact that we believe the Bible is true. And there are a lot of different things that we could talk about. And so we decided on this first episode of this, sub paragraph, I guess, what we've been talking about. We would talk about how do I know the Bible's creation account is real?
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much information out there,
Yeah.
on creation and evolution and that whole thing. There's a lot of information.
Right. And we're not claiming to be experts in this field. It's just one that we really care a lot about.
Right.
We've done a lot of study on it. So we're just going to try to explain our position in this short form presentation. It's just something that we've just loved this for a long time.
We've purchased books and read them. We've,
Gone to seminars.
adult level books, children level books. We've taught classes on it in a Sunday school setting. We have gone to seminars.
We went to the Ark.
We went to the Ark, which has a lot about creationism wrapped up in the Noah's flood, and that we believe that's a real event as well. So we've looked at a lot of different information. In Genesis chapter 1, the first chapter details God creating the heavens and the earth. And it goes into, I'm not going to even be able to list everything, but the earth, the stars, light itself, separating light from dark. He created all of the plants, all of the animals, the water, the air, the land. And finally, he created mankind.
Yeah. And, years ago, most Americans believed this. And then evolution began to be taught first as a theory, and then it was just basically taught as a fact.
Yeah.
So fewer and fewer people believe that Genesis, as written in the Bible, is history. And more often, we're just told, no, just trust the science, And unfortunately, that's what's happening.
Right. Which would be fine if the science were absolutely conclusive, but it's not. And we'll circle back to that. I said I would explain my goofy thing about being dropped off by aliens in the opening skit, but there is no video evidence of how I got into this room or into this seat to do this podcast today.
Right.
So there's also no video evidence of how the earth came to be. Nowadays, I think, it's a complicated topic because we've also got deep fakes, but
you could have deep faked the alien dropping you off.
Oh yeah, that would have been good.
That would have been really good.
That would have only taken way more time and way more money. But if you have video evidence that someone who's an expert can document and say this hasn't been altered, then you can trust what's in this video. Then you go, oh, well, we can prove it. There's a video.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously video's not that old. Even if the Bible account is true, which is the more recent telling of creation, it's, 6,000-ish years ago. Video's been around for a little over 100 years. So nobody has video of it. But if it's true, of course we believe it is, but just trying to follow logic. If it's true, then God was there. Plus he actually did it. He did the creating. The Bible is his word to us. So when God inspired Moses to write Genesis down, that was God's eyewitness account of creation. And so we do have an eyewitness account, if you think about it. Plus, I kind of think that maybe when we get to heaven, there will be a video.
I want to watch that video.
I think God probably can call up a video of anything that's ever happened if he really wants to.
Yeah.
So maybe we can talk him into that.
I want to watch that.
Well, the point is, we got here somehow. We're here. How did we as human, we know how. We know my parents, we know her parents, but on back. How did humankind get here? How did the earth get here? How did the individual animals get here? Were they created more or less like they are now? Did they change a lot? Did they evolve? There's one correct answer, but how do we know? How do we know which one is the correct answer?
Yeah, and in previous episodes, we've explained that we have a biblical worldview. We believe the Bible is true, and we see everything through that filter. But we're not in a cult. We're independent thinkers.
Right.
We would like to think that we're intelligent and that we definitely care about the truth. So we study, and we try to be honest about what we discover.
Yeah, well, we do. Everyone who has a theory about the origins of the earth and its inhabitants has a worldview, even if they don't know what a worldview is. And they process the theories about the origins of the earth through the filter of their worldview. So I told in an earlier podcast that even though I was raised in the church and I believed that the Bible was true, that I kind of went through a period of time where I walked away a little bit, I came back, and then I also was just trying to figure out, what do I believe about creation and evolution and all of that. And I thought, well, I really want to believe that creation is true. But if it's true, there should be scientific facts, or scientific evidence is maybe a better way to put it. There should be trace evidence of what happened that would point back to that creation account. And so then I started looking for that. I will say, as we go through this discussion, neither event is 100% provable because we don't have video evidence. So what do? We go to science and see what science has to say.
Right. So Darwinian evolutionists claim the Earth is about 4.6 billion years old, but there's actually no evidence that that is true. Their mantra is, give me enough time and anything can happen.
Right.
And that's really why they need those billions of years, because they need all of that time for all those changes to take place. However, there's nothing about a rock that can tell you how old it is.
That's true.
They don't come with little labels.
No, and you can't, they're not going to talk back if you ask them a question. Radiometric dating is where I'm going to go next. But I just want to say, the way I understand it, the Darwinian theory of evolution was a thing before science could really prove it one way or another. And as science became more advanced, there started to be evidence that maybe it wasn't true. And so instead of admitting that, a lot of the scientists just extrapolated out the timeline longer and longer. It was millions of years, and then it was billions of years. And I love what you said, Hillary, give me enough time and anything can happen. That's kind of a blanket, we can't prove this and we know we can't prove it. And we're a little disturbed by the fact that the more evidence we get, it kind of almost disproves it, but we're going to stick to it and just tell you that you can't comprehend how long of a time it takes for these changes. And plus I have a PhD, so you should just agree with me and believe
Trust
whatever
me.
I say. Yeah.
Just trust me.
That's definitely an opinion. And I'm not saying every single scientist who's ever taught or defended evolution is necessarily, that's their exact story. But I know that that's been some people's stories. So Hillary said there's nothing about a rock that will tell you how old it is. Scientists have tried to use radiometric dating. There are different types. We don't have time to go deeply into all of them, but none of them have proven to be really reliable. A couple examples. Mount St Helens is a mountain in the Pacific Northwest in the U.S., and it It was also a volcano and erupted in 1980. There were trees on Mount St. Helens that were blown down the mountain and into Spirit Lake at that time, at the time of that blast. Well, there were trees that a couple of years later in 1982, some scientists went and they found some trees. They measured the rings. They found them to be basically 20-year-old trees. Well, these trees had already petrified.
Wow.
In 2 years. A lot of scientists will tell you that it takes millions of years for something something like a tree to become a rock, but that's not necessarily true. And again, I'm not going to go way into it, but there are other examples of places on the planet where things can petrify and have petrified pretty quickly.
Right.
That's known that it doesn't have to be millions of years now. But these trees that were petrified, they also wanted to date them. And so they knew that in 1982, they were 20-year-old trees that had then been blown off the mountain 2 years ago. So they're 22 years old. That math is not hard. They used carbon dating to see what it would say. How old are these trees? All the specimens that they dated were dated to be between 100 years. And before I finish the sentence, I just want to say, if it's 22 years, let's just round back down to 20 because it makes the math easy. They're off by a factor of 5. To say this 20-year-old tree is 100, they're off by a factor of 5. But if you're trying to date things that you think are millions or billions of years old and you're only off by 80 years, that's not too bad. That's pretty close.
That's pretty close.
That's pretty close when you're talking about this much time to be close. The trees that were known to be 22 years old came back through the carbon dating method to be between 100 years and 36,000 years old.
That's an old tree.
These are trees that they knew were standing on the side of the mountain, green and growing 2 years earlier, and that they were only 20 years old when they were knocked off the mountain, and the dating comes back to 36 years. Now, that's just one example. I'm not saying that one thing blows evolution completely out of the water, but that type of thing, there have been many experiments where scientists have known the age of something and have sent it off to labs to say, hey,
please date this.
This is your specialty. Date this and get back to us. And it's like, we know how old it is. And the radiometric dating methods are way, way off. One other example, there's a volcano in Hawaii that erupted about 200 years ago. I think it was right around the year 1800. And 200 years later, around 2000, they took samples of this lava flow that they knew exactly when it was created. It was magma that came out of the volcano. Mm-hmm. And went into the water and cooled off and became rock. So this 200-year-old rock every specimen tested between 12 and 21 million years old.
And actually, that's science. Like, to take something to know the age, right, and then to say, okay, let's run a test. Let's test this and see if our dating is correct. We know the age of this.
Yeah.
And then it comes back with an answer that is completely wrong.
Right.
That's science. That's saying, oh, my test is not reliable because it failed the scientific test.
That's exactly right. And the thing that we definitely know from that is that sometimes young things test to be much, much, much older than they really are. Mm-hmm. The big problem I have with it is, even though some scientists are saying, hey, we should pay attention to this, and as I mentioned earlier, maybe some of these methods aren't as reliable as we thought. Maybe they're not reliable at all. But some scientists are just doubling down, and they ignore all the tests that don't work, and they say, hey, we've radiometric dated this and we know exactly how old it is, and they just act like it's an ironclad test that always works, even though there's plenty of evidence that it doesn't always work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another topic, if you believe that the Bible is true, then you can actually go through the genealogies in the Bible And it's not exact, but it's approximate, and it adds up to about 6,000 years.
Yeah.
And that's roughly how old we think the earth is.
Yeah.
So this would be a crazy thing to believe if science disproved it, but science does not disprove that. Now, again, we said if they're testing things inaccurately and they're saying, "Oh no, we know these are millions and millions of years old." Well, but we've also shown your dating methods can be inaccurate.
Right.
And so there's so many things I love. We were watching a video and they talked about the saltiness of the ocean, the salinity, and how they can measure that, and based on that, it shows that the Earth should be about 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
The moon is moving every year, and based on the increments of that movement, they know that, again, if it were more than 6,000 years ago, that like the moon would actually be on top of us. I think that was one of the
the
math,
moon
right?
is moving around the Earth constantly, but what they're saying is every year the moon is a little bit further away.
Right.
So it doesn't keep the exact same path around the Earth. It's almost like a spiral. It's very slowly going a little bit farther, a little bit farther, a little bit farther. So in 5 years, it's going to be 10 inches farther away than it was.
Right.
And so if they reverse engineer that as far back as the evolutionary scientists say the age of the Earth is, then the moon would have been, I don't know how to just, show this with my hands, but the moon would have been stuck to the Earth.
Yep.
Which is
just
nobody
on top of us.
Nobody, including the evolutionary scientists, think that's what happened, but the science doesn't track.
Yeah. So, there's so many observations, even the ones you mentioned with the eruption on Mount St. Helens and its aftermath. It shows that the biblical age of the Earth could be correct.
Yeah.
It could be.
It definitely could. I was kind of surprised to realize that even quite a few Christians doubt that the Genesis creation story is reliable and is true history. They want to say, well, maybe it's poetry. And I think this is not because there's anything in the Bible that would imply that the way it's written, it's poetry. It's not written as poetry if you study it. The genre of Genesis is definitely that it is history and that it is written for you to know accurate history. I think the reason why sometimes Christians believe that is because science and scientists have been so convincing in their explanation of evolution. And again, where it's transitioned from a theory to many of them claiming it's a fact, that people, kind of say, well, you trust the science, even if they don't know whether the science itself is trustworthy. And just to be clear, in case anyone's questioning this, we think science is great.
I love science.
Observational science, if you do it right and you are willing to live with the results, so whether they say what you want them to say or not, we're pro science. Just do it accurately and be honest about what you find. That's really what we're saying.
Yeah.
But it makes me sad when Christians look for ways to infuse, I call it non-scientific science. The science that has been proven to be unreliable, but people are still promoting it. And then Christians go, I don't know, it must be true. So I guess we have to try to make the Bible fit the science, which is the opposite of a biblical worldview.
Well, and nobody wants to look dumb.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Right.
If this really intelligent, well-educated person is telling you, no, I know this is true, but it goes against maybe what you were taught or what you read in the Bible, you're like, well, I mean, legitimately, they probably are smarter than me. So maybe what they're saying is true. There's just that pressure to not want to look like the dumb one in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I have theories about how smart people are too. So. I like how the person, and when I say I like, I'm saying that sarcastically. I like how the person with the biggest degree or the largest number of formal degrees is always the smartest person in the room. And yeah, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble, but I'm going to say it anyway. I respect people who have degrees. I respect people who have a lot of degrees. But the main thing that tells us is that you were good at school. People who don't get a lot of degrees are like, I'm done with school, or they just don't have the money to keep going, or they have a job that they're fine with and they don't need a master's or a doctorate or 12 doctorates. Sometimes people with a lot of advanced degrees are experts and they're really, really good at what they have a degree in. And I'm not saying that they don't, but sometimes people with degrees are not super honest, and sometimes they coast, and then they still claim to be the smartest person in the room. And other people are like, oh, my bad, you have a PhD. I would never question you. I'm sorry. And I think that's a little suspect.
Okay.
Sometimes just,
Oh, I'm not saying you're wrong.
don't assume just because someone, right. Like, I don't assume that I know who you are because of your skin color or your height or your color of your eyes or your age or your gender or your degree. I'm just saying.
Well, and intelligence and wisdom aren't the same thing.
There it is right there. That's why she's the smart one. Some people have a theory that God did create the earth, but he used millions of years to do it. And
I used to think about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I first, so in school, I was taught evolution, and I was a good student. And so I just believed what people told me. It was in your book. It's printed. It must be true.
Right.
And I didn't really think about it. And then when I really started reading my Bible, I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't really match up. And so I was trying to make those things make sense because they didn't make sense together.
Right.
And so I thought, oh, okay. Okay, so God must have created everything, and he must have used millions of years, because the Bible is true. I believe the Bible, and I believe my teachers are true. Like, my teachers don't tell me wrong things. So I just put them together. And I was like, there, that works. But it doesn't actually.
Right.
It doesn't work.
That's a super normal thing to think. And I think a lot of people have come to that conclusion at some point or another. So we believe the Bible is true. And of course, the title of this episode is, how do I know that the Bible is true? Or in this case, how do I know the biblical account of creation is true? Well, this account, when it talks about day 1, day 2, day 3, it talks about the days individually. And some people say, well, but we don't know what day means.
Hey, it could mean other things.
Well, it's the Hebrew word yom, and yom is very much like our English word day. And it can mean different things. Like, what kind of different ways can you use the word day, Hillary?
Well, it could be like, back in my day.
Right.
Because we're getting old enough we can say that now.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean one day. It means a period of time.
Right.
Back in my day.
Right. That's right.
So it could mean
Old school.
Lots of time. Yeah.
You could say, if you're telling a story about something, you could say, well, it happened during the day.
Okay.
And then you're kind of like, well, I'm differentiating that it didn't happen at night. It happened while the sun was out. So that's another usage.
Or you could say, well, I went there one day last week.
Yeah.
And that would mean...
Now you're talking 24-hour period.
Yeah. Yep.
And usually we would use a specific day, like Wednesday, or Thursday. But everywhere the Hebrew word yom, spelled Y-O-M, is used in the Bible, which it's used many places throughout the Bible, not just in the creation account in Genesis, but whenever it's used with morning or evening or a number, you can tell from context that it means an actual day, like a 24-hour day, a standard period of time. And in the creation account, we see all those things. In fact, and somebody over here who I said is really smart has all of that memorized. So when God tells us how he created the earth and he talks about a day, what are some of the other words he throws in there to help us figure it out?
Yeah, and he says, and there was evening and there was morning the first day.
Mm-hmm.
So he uses the word evening, he uses the word morning, he assigns a number, and any time else in the Bible where those words are also used with yom, it means 24 hours.
Yeah.
So
why would the creation account be the only time that he didn't mean that?
right.
The only reason people say that is because they're trying to find a way to cram evolution into the pages of the Bible, even though it doesn't belong there.
Have you ever heard anybody say, like during the account when Joshua and they lead the people around Jericho, they march for how many days? It's like, I think it's 7
days.
7 days. Do you ever hear anybody say, well, we don't really know if those were actual days? I mean, a day.
It might have been 7 million days.
It could have been 7 million. You know, with the Lord,
7 million years.
a day it's like 1,000 years. So they could have been marching for 7,000. We just don't know. Nobody says that.
No.
Because from the context, you can tell that they were marching for days for 24-hour periods.
Context.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
But when you use those same rules on Genesis 1, they just say, "Oh, no, we could never never be sure. We can't know." Even though when our dad wrote it, it's like when you tell your kids stuff and you're like, "I want you to go to the store and get just this bottle of milk." And they're like, "Well, but did she mean just the milk? Maybe she meant I could get a candy bar too." It's like, I put on the note, just the milk.
Right. And apparently this is a very old example because milk still comes in
I
bottles.
know. I couldn't even think of the word. I was like, what's that white thing the milk comes in? Jug. Carton? What is it?
It's a jug. Milk jug.
Okay.
Or carton, but
Yeah.
we buy it in jugs. We drink a lot of milk. But
Maybe I buy mine and I have a grandbaby that maybe needs bottles. So
okay.
bottles.
Right. So
Moving on.
the point, and we'll wrap this up because we've about hit our time, but when God tells us there was evening, there was morning the first day, and he tells us what he did on that day, and he tells us what he did the next day, and there was evening, there was morning the second day, then you can tell me if I get the wording wrong, but he does that for all 6 days.
Yes.
And then he says on the seventh day he rested. And so that's not the exception of Yom, meaning a 24-hour day. God is being very specific and intentional about using all the qualifiers so that we'll know from the context it means 24 hours. And next episode, we're going to talk a little bit about maybe some other reasons why people don't necessarily believe that. They don't want to believe the 24-hour day. But yeah, this has been a good start to our discussion about creation. We still don't know how many episodes we're going to devote to this, but it's a topic that we love, and we'll definitely pick it up from here next week. We really appreciate you joining us. Maybe check out some of the other content. If you go to our YouTube channel, The David and Hillary Show, we have movie reviews there, and check it out. But we appreciate your time. We know it's important.
It's been a good day.
It has been a good day. All right. Glad you could share it with us. We're David and Hillary, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.